Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Sāmaṇera Nipako, and we will be going over the Tapussasutta in Kruta Nikaya 9.41 today. We'll start with a short meditation, and then after that, we'll get started on the sutta. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. So we'll begin with a short silent meditation, and I'll ring the bell when we're done, and then we'll get started with the sutta. Great. So hello to Madeline, to Bhumika, and to Jayanta. So hopping right into the sutta. As stated earlier, today we'll be going over the Tapussasutta with the householder Tapussa in Grutta Nikaya 9.41. At one time, the Buddha was staying in the land of the Mallas, near the Malayan town named Uruelakapa. Then, the Buddha robed up in the morning and, taking his bowl and robe, entered Uruelakapa for alms. Then, after the meal, on his return from alms round, he addressed Venerable Ananda. Ananda, you stay right here while I plunge deep into the great wood for the day's meditation. Yes, sir, Ananda replied. Then the Buddha plunged deep into the great wood and sat at the root of a tree for the day's meditation. The householder, Tapussa, went up to Venerable Nanda, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, Honorable Ananda, we are lay people who enjoy sensual pleasures. We like sensual pleasures. We love them and take joy in them. But renunciation seems like an abyss. So part of why I chose this sutta is because I've noticed a lot of questions about renunciation lately and how one could apply that in their lay life. And while I haven't seen somebody use the word choice abyss yet, I do think that this is something that a lot of people would find relatable in terms of trying to practice renunciation. In the beginning, it really does seem like something that's deep and dark and scary and impossible to really do, especially since until we start to get a taste of it, just hearing the Buddha or some arahants talk about how wonderful the bliss of renunciation is, it's not too convincing. So by going through part of this sutta, I'm hoping to help give some imagery that the Buddha also used elsewhere as a means of making renunciation seem a little bit less like an abyss. And a key point about this sutta that Tapussa is about to mention is how renunciation makes a big difference between how lay people practice and how monastics tend to practice. So continuing with the sutta, I have heard that in this teaching and training, there are very young mendicants whose minds leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, and become decided in renunciation. They see it as peaceful. Renunciation is the dividing line between the multitude, so most people, and the mendicants in this teaching and training. Householder, we should see the Buddha about this matter. Come, let's go to the Buddha and inform him about this. As he answers, so we'll remember it. Yes, sir, replied Tapussa. Then Ananda, together with Tapussa, went to the Buddha, bowed, and sat down to one side. Ananda told him what had happened. That's so true, Ananda. That's so true. Before my awakening, when I was still unawakened, but intent on awakening, I too thought, renunciation is good, seclusion is good, but my mind did not leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, and become decided in renunciation. I didn't see it as peaceful. So there's not too many spots in the suttas where you get to hear the Buddha talk about his practice before he was enlightened. And I remember the first time that I read this, I was like, wow, even the Buddha felt this way when he was still unawakened. So if he felt this way and I feel this way, then that means I too can work through this. And this probably means he's going to tell me how he worked through it. And that is exactly what this sutta does. This is something that I think is really good to reflect on as well, that it's not just you, even the Buddha was here. Really let that sink in. Somebody who is as talented, as amazing, as genius, as incredible as the Buddha did not get excited about renunciation before his awakening. People often seem to think that just from the start, the Buddha knew exactly what he was doing and had no struggles or problems whatsoever. But this shows that it was otherwise. So continuing with the sutta, then I thought, what is the cause, what is the reason why my mind does not leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, and become decided in renunciation? Why don't I see it as peaceful? So before I continue, based on your own practice, how do you think you would answer this question? What makes renunciation an abyss? What makes you undecided? What makes you not so sure about your confidence? What makes you hesitate to practice renunciation? And it doesn't even need to be anything big. It could be something as skipping 1 meal a day when you have 3 meals. What makes you hesitant about doing that? So whatever has come to mind in regards to what makes renunciation difficult for you, we can work with that in terms of how the Buddha answers it. Then I thought, I haven't seen the drawbacks of sensual pleasures, and so I haven't cultivated that. I haven't realized the benefits of renunciation, and so I haven't developed that. That's why my mind does not leap forth, gain confidence, settle down, and become decided in renunciation. And that's why I don't see it as peaceful. So with this, you can think, okay, that's great, but what exactly does the Buddha mean when he says that I haven't seen the drawbacks of sensual pleasures, or I haven't realized the benefits of renunciation? Depending upon how much of the suttas you're familiar with, you might be able to think of some examples. But if not, he doesn't actually give any similes in this particular sutta about those two things. So I found some other suttas where he does go over the benefits of renunciation and the drawbacks of sensuality. So for this next portion, I'm mostly going to just read what the Buddha had to share, as I think he puts much of it very brilliantly. And if there's anything that I think is unclear, then I will put in some of my own commentary or experience. But in some of these examples, the Buddha gives some really beautiful, memorable, and clear imagery about the drawbacks of sensuality. And if you're on YouTube at least, there are links to these suttas that I'm going to mention in the description, as well as the usual link to the main sutta that I'm reading today. So the first sutta is Dhammapada, verse 186. It is in the area about the Buddhas. Even if it were raining money, you'd not be sated in sensual pleasures. An astute person understands that sensual pleasures offer little gratification and much suffering. So a quick thought on this one is that money is one of those things where people can collect more and more and more of it and always feel like they need a little bit more, either for feeling secure or for safety or just because they like it, whatever it may be, way beyond whatever it is that they need to take care of themselves and or other obligations. So this is something to reflect on. If you were to win like a $50 million lottery or something, would you still want more because the 50 million is not enough to do everything you would want? I have heard so many conversations with my coworkers in my previous job about this sort of thing. They'd be like, oh yes, X amount of money would be great. And so how can you see that in your own life with however you have your own means? The next sutta is Majjhima Nikaya 54, specifically starting at the dangers of sensual pleasures. The link in the description should jump to this immediately, but if not, it is about halfway through the sutta if you scroll on Sutta Central. Householder. Suppose a dog weak with hunger was hanging around a butcher's shop. A deft butcher or their apprentice would toss them a skeleton scraped clean of flesh and smeared in blood. What do you think, householder? Gnawing on such a fleshless skeleton, would that dog still get rid of its hunger? No, sir. Why not? Because that skeleton is scraped clean of flesh and smeared in blood. That dog will eventually get weary and frustrated. In the same way, a noble disciple reflects. With the simile of a skeleton, the Buddha said that sensual pleasures give little gratification and much suffering and distress, and they are all the more full of drawbacks. Having truly seen this with right understanding, they shun equanimity based on diversity, which is one of the formless types of meditation, so don't get hung up on that, and develop only the equanimity based on unity, where all kinds of grasping to the worldly pleasures of the flesh cease without anything left over. Suppose a vulture or a crow or a hawk would grab a scrap of meat and fly away. Other vultures, crows, and hawks would keep chasing it, pecking it, and clawing. What do you think, householder? If that vulture, crow, or hawk doesn't quickly let go of that scrap of meat, wouldn't that result in death or deadly suffering from them? Yes, sir. So for this, an idea that you could think to apply to your own life is when people have an object or a resource that others want, people will hurt each other over it. People go to war over all sorts of things. So how do you see this in your life? How are you the crow or the vulture that is attacking the hawk? And how in other times are you the hawk that is being attacked by the crows and the vultures? Because we've been on both sides of this, depending upon what the particular resource is that we're desiring that we have or that we want. Suppose a person carrying a blazing grass torch was to walk against the wind. What do you think, householder? If that person doesn't quickly let go of that blazing grass torch, wouldn't they burn their hands or arm or other major or minor limb, resulting in death or deadly suffering from them? Yes, sir. Suppose there was a pit of glowing coals deeper than a man's height, full of glowing coals that neither flamed nor smoked. Then a person would come along who wants to live and doesn't want to die, who wants to be happy and recoils from pain. Two strong men would grab them by the arms and drag them towards the pit of glowing coals. What do you think, householder? Wouldn't that person writhe and struggle to and fro? Yes, sir. Why is that? For that person knows, if I fall in that pit of glowing coals, that result in my death or deadly pain. Suppose a person was to see delightful parks, woods, meadows, and a lotus pond in a dream, but when they woke, they couldn't see them at all. Suppose a man had borrowed some goods, a gentleman's carriage, and fine jeweled earrings, and preceded and surrounded by these, he proceeded through the middle of Apana. When people saw him, they'd say, "This must be a wealthy man, for that's how the wealthy enjoy their wealth." But when the owners saw him, they'd take back what was theirs. What do you think? Would that be enough for that man to get upset? Yes, sir. Why is that? Because the owners took back what's theirs. So on these examples here, something that you can see the Buddha touching on is with the fire in both the torch and the coals, that sexual pleasures hurt. And you might first think, okay, I'm not quite convinced on this. How could they possibly hurt? When I eat a piece of cake, I don't feel like I'm being burnt in a pit of glowing coals. Maybe I have some digestive problems and a little bit of regret later, but it's nothing as extreme as this. So this type of visual might be too strong in the beginning, but it's something to reflect on. Why does the Buddha say that? Why does he use such a strong image? And the more that one gets accustomed to renunciation, the more that these stronger similes begin to make sense. But the ones following up from this are more palpable. I think most people can relate to having a dream that was so great, so real, and then they woke up in the middle of it and they tried to go back to sleep, but they couldn't go back to that dream. That's disappointing. It's impermanence, which the Buddha talks about all the time. Insubstantial, unreliable. And you can see that in your day-to-day activities as well. If you're out on a beautiful hike and you're at the peak of the mountain and there's a sunset with clouds and it's got all those pinks and oranges and reds, and maybe you've got some God rays in there as well. It's in the fall, or maybe it's in the winter, picturesque, something you'd see on National Geographic. It's going to end. That's disappointing. And once it's done, you can't go back to it. Similarly with the man with borrowed goods. When we have something that we cherish a lot, it could be stolen. That upsets people, understandably, when their valuable things are taken away. It's impermanent, and maybe they can get them back at some point, but there's no guarantee that it'll be found, and if they do, it might not be in the condition it was when it was stolen. Or another thing with borrowed goods, credit card debt. You think, oh, I'll pay now, I'll buy this now, and then I'll pay them back later. So many people get stuck in that cycle, and before they know it, they have $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in credit card debt. And sometimes it's for survival purposes, but a lot of the time it's for buying things, like the jewelry that's an example here. It's basically a borrowed good until you've paid back whatever that amount of money is on your card. And credit card debt causes a lot of suffering. So when you're reading through these, if they seem far away, you can think of examples like I've been giving here, but applying to your own life. That way, when these types of opportunities to reflect on the drawbacks of sexual pleasures arise, you'll have your own connection to be able to bring it to the surface when you need it. Otherwise, if you just hear examples from myself or the Buddha on the drawbacks of renunciation, it's just like, okay. Try to make it more personal. That way it's more memorable. Going to the next example in the sutta. Suppose there was a dense forest grove not far from a town or village, and there was a tree laden with fruit, yet none of the fruit had fallen to the ground. And along came a person in need of fruit, wandering in search of fruit. Having plunged deep into that forest grove, they'd see that tree laden with fruit. They'd think, that tree is laden with fruit, yet none of the fruit has fallen to the ground. But I know how to climb a tree. Why don't I climb the tree, eat as much as I like, then fill my pouch? And that's what they'd do. And along would come a second person in need of fruit, wandering in search of fruit, carrying a sharp axe. Having plunged deep into that forest grove, they'd see that tree laden with fruit. They'd think, that tree is laden with fruit, yet none of the fruit has fallen to the ground. But I don't know how to climb a tree. Why don't I chop this tree down at the root, eat as much as I like, then fill my pouch? And so they chop the tree down at the root. What do you think, householder? If the first person who climbed the tree doesn't quickly come down, when that tree fell, wouldn't they break their hand or arm or other major or minor limb, resulting in death or deadly suffering from them? Yes, sir. In the same way, a noble disciple reflects. With the simile of the fruit tree, the Buddha has said that sensual pleasures give little gratification and much suffering and distress, and they are all the more full of drawbacks. Having truly seen this with right understanding, they shun equanimity based on diversity and develop only the equanimity based on unity, where all kinds of grasping lead to the worldly pleasures of the flesh cease without anything left over. So moving on to the next sutta. This is within the Sutta Nipata, 4.1, Sensual Pleasures. This one is a translation by Ajahn Jeff, as I personally find it to be a little bit more understandable than Bhante Sujato's. If one, longing for sensual pleasure, achieves it, yes, he's enraptured at heart. The mortal gets what he wants. But if for that person, longing, desiring, the pleasures diminish, he's afflicted as if shot with an arrow. Whoever avoids sensual desires as he would with his foot the head of a snake goes beyond, mindful, this attachment in the world. A man who is greedy for fields, land, gold, cattle, horses, servants, employees, women, relatives, many sensual pleasures, is overpowered with weakness and trampled by trouble, for pain invades him as water a cracked boat. So one, always mindful, should avoid sensual pleasures. Letting them go, he'd cross over the flood, like one who, having bailed out the boat, has reached the far shore. So this sutta, so short, is so full, packed to the gills with wonderful imagery. First, somebody is happy when they get what they want, and then once what they want diminishes, it's like they were shot with an arrow. That would be incredibly painful. You have the imagery of the head of a snake here. And in particular, when the Buddha tends to talk about snakes, it's poisonous snakes. So if you're walking around in the woods, you would really want to avoid one. And I've been in areas where there's tall grass and there's copperheads and rattlesnakes in the area. If you're walking through something like that, you are really mindful. Sensual pleasures, like a snake waiting to bite you. A man who wants all these sorts of things, a woman as well, fields, land, gold, cattle, horses, servants, employees, men, relatives, any sensual pleasure. If they don't get them, or even if they do and they lose them, overpowered with weakness, trampled by trouble. It's like water invading a cracked boat. You're quite literally in some deep water if your boat is leaking. So that's a really big deal. And I had already given some examples in the previous suttas for how you can apply those examples to your life. So this one, since it's so short and it already has some very strong imagery, I highly recommend that you try to find ways in which you can make these images memorable in your life. When are you in that sinking boat? When are you in that position where you've been shot by an arrow because whatever you acquired is diminishing? What are you greedy for? What is overpowering you? What is troubling you? And then moving on to the last sutta that we'll be going over today, which is Majjhima Nikaya 13. I'm going to find where I'm going to start. So like the previous link, it should lead you to where you'll be able to find it. If not, it's about a quarter of the way down if you scroll, and if you know how to put on the numbers, it starts at 7.9. These are the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. The pleasure and happiness that arise from the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. This is the gratification of sensual pleasures. So basically, any of your senses, your taste, your thought, your touch, your smell, your hearing, anything that is pleasing through these 5 senses, that is the gratification. So as many kinds of people as there is as many kinds of gratification for sensual pleasures. It is literally infinite. So whatever makes you feel elated and wanting more, or at the very least not aversive to something, that is the gratification. And what is the drawback of sensual pleasures? It's when a gentleman earns a living by means such as arithmetic, accounting, calculating, farming, trade, raising cattle, archery, government service, or one of the professions. But they must face cold and heat, being hurt by the touch of flies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and reptiles, and risking death from hunger and thirst. This is a drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in the present life, a mass of suffering caused by sensual pleasures. That gentleman might try hard, strive, and make an effort, but fail to acquire money. If that happens, they sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion, saying, "Oh, my hard work is wasted. My efforts are fruitless." This, too, is a drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in the present life, a mass of suffering caused by sensual pleasures. Relatable? That gentleman might try hard, strive, to make an effort and succeed in earning money. But they experience pain and sadness when they try to protect it, thinking, "How can I prevent my wealth from being taken by rulers or bandits, consumed by fire, swept away by flood, or taken by unloved heirs?" And a modern example might be the stock market crashing. And even though they protect it and ward it, rulers or bandits take it, or fire consumes it, or flood sweeps it away, or unloved heirs take it. They sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. What once was mine is gone. This too is a drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in the present life, a mass of suffering caused by sensual pleasures. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, kings fight with kings, aristocrats fight with aristocrats, Brahmins fight with Brahmins, and householders fight with householders. A mother fights with her child, child with mother, father with child, and child with father. Brother fights with brother, brother with sister, sister with brother, and friend fights with friend. Once they've started quarreling, arguing, and disputing, they attack each other with fists, stones, rods, and swords, resulting in death and deadly pain. This, too, is a drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in the present life, a mass of suffering caused by sensual pleasures. This one in particular, I think, is especially potent because we've all been there, or we've all seen somebody who has been engaged in this type of behavior. One thing that comes to mind in particular for this one and the previous one is if someone doesn't have like a living will, or perhaps somebody has dementia or Alzheimer's and a family member convinces them to change it. And once they pass away, there's all this hoopla and hullabaloo over the wealth that they did have, or the things that they did have. And there is lots of fighting, lots of pain, and so much trouble. All for stuff and for money. So, when you catch yourself fighting with other people over stuff and things, think of the previous sutta, or not the previous sutta, the previous example. Even if you do get it, even after all of this fighting and drama and pain, you get it. There's no guarantee you're going to be able to keep it. And if you do, you're still going to die. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, they don their sword and shield, fasten their bow and arrows, and plunge into a battle massed on both sides, with arrows and spears flying and swords flashing. They are struck with arrows and spears, and their heads are chopped off, resulting in death and deadly pain. This, too, is a drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in the present life, a mass of suffering caused by sensual pleasures. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, they don their sword and shield, fasten their bow and arrows, and charge wetly plastered bastions with arrows and spears flying and swords flashing. They are struck with arrows and spears, splashed with dung, crushed by a superior force, and their heads are chopped off, resulting in death and deadly pain. This, too, is a drawback of sensual pleasures, apparent in the present life, a mass of suffering caused by sensual pleasures. How many wars have been fought so that some king or some ruler can have more stuff, more gold, more land, more something? So many people have had exactly this happen for the benefit of somebody else to get things. Sensual pleasures. And this is something that still continues today. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, they break into houses, plunder wealth, steal from isolated buildings, commit highway robbery, and commit adultery. The rulers would arrest them and subject them to various punishments: whipping, caning, and clubbing, cutting off hands or feet or both, cutting off ears or nose or both, the porridge pot, the shell shave, the rahu's mouth, the garland of fire, the burning hand, the bulrush twist, the bark dress, the antelope, the meat hook, the coins, the caustic pickle, the twisting bar, the straw mat, being splashed with hot oil, being fed to the hounds, being impaled alive, and being beheaded. These result in death and deadly pain. This, too, is a drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in the present life, a mass of suffering caused by sensual pleasures. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, they conduct themselves badly by way of body, speech, and mind. When their body breaks up, after death, they're reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. This is a drawback of sensual pleasures to do with lives to come, a mass of suffering caused by sensual pleasures. So, there's some really powerful imagery in here, and we're starting to run low on time. So, at the bottom here, or more like the middle of the sutta, the Buddha says, what is the escape from sexual pleasures? Removing and giving up desire for greed for sexual pleasures. This is the escape from sexual pleasures. So, this is very brief, but it's at the end of all of this. So, when it comes to removing and giving up desire for sensual pleasures, there are so many examples here. It doesn't matter which ones you decide to utilize in your own life. When you see yourself getting caught in these traps, you can return to them. As a really simple, common example, say that you've decided, I'm going to take the uposa today. I'm going to do some renunciation that's low commitment. It's only one day. I will be fine. In particular, you think you're going to struggle with the precept around food. You have breakfast, you have a big lunch, you're like, I'm going to do this. And then you get home from work and your partner happens to be making your favorite meal, and you didn't inform them that you would be taking the uposa today. What of these come to mind that you could fall back on, and also skillfully talk to your partner about why you can't have your favorite meal that day? This was something that when I first started to take on the 8 precepts in lay life, that would happen sometimes, where I would come home. I was still living with my parents at the time, and my mom would be making something that I really liked. And a compromise I would often make as an idea here is I'd tell her I'd have it for lunch the next day, and she was always okay with that. And also communicating when I would be observing these. And the more I would reflect on this sutta and other ones, the more I had different images come into mind when something would come up. When was I responding reactively to something? So acting poorly by body, speech, or mind that would be detriment for me now or in the future. When am I being greedy about that food? When am I being greedy about money? When am I being greedy about this or that? And there are so many opportunities for renunciation. So, since we're running low on time, to open up to questions, if renunciation is new, start small. 5 precepts, and if you can't keep all 5, pick one that you think you'll have a little bit of a struggle with, but not too much. Build up your confidence that you can practice renunciation. You're not going to be able to lift up a 100-pound dumbbell if you can't even lift up 5 pounds. Start small, start easy, build up. And if possible, find friends that'll practice with you. This was a huge benefit for me in the early days on Bhante Jayasara's server, Magaseka. We would have uposatha parties, basically. A whole bunch of us would take uposatha for the day and support each other. We would share our struggles throughout the day and how we worked through them in the past to help out the other people that were having struggles. So find a support system. And if you do end up not going quite the way you want to, that's okay. That's a learning opportunity. Don't beat yourself up. So moving to the questions. So hello Gregory, hello Diane, hello John, hello Sering, hello Difference is Spreading, hello Kanti. So I see one question. Difference is I spread and says, Bhante, this talk of the dangers of sensual pleasures is really helpful for renunciates, reminding them of the value of ordination. But what about the guidance for how lay people can live? So this is exactly why I kept giving examples for what I would do when I was still a lay person. And I had to get creative, and I would look actually how monks lived and try to practice that way in uposatha days. So that's one basic way you can, just saying, okay, I'm going to follow the 8 precepts today. That's renunciation. Even just following the 5 precepts, you're renouncing killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants. A lot of people are asked to lie at their job. So sticking to your honesty, despite the fact that it might cause you some problems, maybe your boss will yell at you or you'll have to redo something, that's renunciation. Not going out for drinks with your friends or your family, that's renunciation. A lot of people lose friends over that kind of thing. People like that people drink with them. That is a really big deal to give that up. Not stealing, that's a type of renunciation. Respecting people's physical boundaries and boundaries within a relationship, a lot of people don't follow that either. Not killing, all of these give safety to all the beings around you and yourself. So while it may not feel like renunciation, if it's something you've been practicing for a while, it really is. And if it's something you haven't been practicing, each precept, depending upon your own disposition, can be really hard, let alone all 5. So just that there is renunciation. And then other small ways you can do it, like food. All of us have to eat. All of us have likes and dislikes for the types of food we eat. Because I knew I wanted to be a monk for a long time. A way that I would practice renunciation was that I would usually just look what was in the cabinet, and then I would cook based off what was in there. And some of this was also because I was very poor for a while, but it really made me appreciate what I had and not go out and keep spending. So gratification of things that I actually want to eat. I was eating a lot of beans and rice during that time. Or if you're at a family party, if you really like, I don't know, maybe like the shrimp that my family would bring out for Thanksgiving, or if you're going into southeastern Connecticut in the one area where we have Krispy Kremes, not going to do that. Or at the meals here, advice that is commonly given to people is don't take any desserts. It's usually on the other counter. Take what's healthy, take what you need, don't take what you're greedy for. That's also renunciation. Someone insults you, you catch yourself in your reactive behavior, and you don't insult them back, you reply to them skillfully, that's also renunciation. You're renouncing poor speech, and you're creating a space of harmony. Be creative. That was the biggest help for me in terms of renunciation. And the Buddha gives so many examples in this as well that lay people can relate to. Like in, I think it was the last one I had read, Majjhima Nikaya 13, there's all the woes about work, about having things, about not having enough. When you go through these examples, how can you apply them to your life? Because that is the best guidance for how a layperson can live. Because everyone is going to have different circumstances. I can share all the things that I was doing, and that's not necessarily going to be relevant to your particular situation. So be creative. You don't have to live like a monk to renounce. And before closing, since we only have 1 minute left, another way to go about this is go spend time at monasteries. It doesn't matter what kind of monastery, just go spend time at them. You will renounce your preferences on the type of work you're doing, the amount of time you're meditating, the amount of time you have sleep, what you're eating, when you're eating, who you are staying with, and so many other things. And then how can you take that back home with you? When I was still practicing with Zen Mountain Monastery, that was exactly what I did. How can I take the monastery home with me? How can I apply what I am learning here back home? And again, it's going to be different depending upon every person's individual circumstances. So be creative. This was actually a really wonderful way to bring renunciation into my life in a joyful way. How can I make my life as much like the monastery as possible? It's so great to be at the monastery. How can I make my home life much better as well? So don't limit yourself. And I think that'll be it for now, and I don't see any other questions. So tonight we're going to have our normal monk chat from 7:30 to 9 o'clock, or however long it'll be. Everyone is welcome. And for anyone who's local but may not know, we also have tea time from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. And if you come for tea time, you are also welcome to stay for our pujas, which are usually from 6:30 to 7:15 on Wednesday and Friday. And on Thursday, they are from 6:30 to 8. So you're all welcome to come for that as well. And for people that may not know, we also have residency opportunities until the end of December, and we'll be going on winter retreat for January and February. So Suki Hotu, may you all be happy, well, and peaceful. Be creative in your renunciation. Have it be joyful. If nothing else, take that away from here. So enjoy the rest of your days. Practice well, be well, and we'll see you all next time.